there, and welcome back for our next video in APUS history. We're taking a look at the election of 1860 and the secession of Southern states. Your main objective is pretty simple for this lesson. Describe the effects of Lincoln's election. And the key concept is very clear. Abraham Lincoln's victory on the Republicans' Free Soil platform in the presidential election of 1860 was accomplished without any Southern electoral votes. After a series of contested debates about secession, most slave states voted to secede from the Union, precipitating the Civil War. So we're going to do a brief historical context, talk about some of the nuts and bolts of the election of 1860, and then discuss not only the developments of slavery, but also the long-standing historical debate over the causes of secession. So, as a review, our last lesson looked at the failure of compromise. We specifically looked at the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the Dred Scott decision. We looked at the caning of Charles Sumner and Bleeding Kansas. We looked at John Brown's raid. And so we looked at all of these events that just increased the tensions rather than solved the sectional tensions. In fact, we see an increase. Northerners feared even more that a slave power conspiracy was developing, that there were groups within and outside of government that were working to increase the possibility of slavery spreading not only into the Western territories, but also into the Northern territories that had previously been excluding slavery through the Louisiana Purchase and the Missouri Compromise. Southern fears over Northern efforts to destroy slavery using slave rebellion were reinforced with the ignorance of the Dred Scott decision and also John Brown's raid. So we see these sectional tensions only increasing throughout the antebellum years in the 1850s. So moving forward into the election of 1860, you can see just based on this slide here that it is a unique election. There are actually 4 candidates that are running. And one of the biggest things that was going on was the Democratic Party was splintered. They were not able to agree on one candidate. And so they nominated Stephen Douglas by Northern Democrats, and Southern Democrats nominated John Breckinridge. Now, if you look closely at their platforms, and this is just a brief synopsis, it actually isn't too far different. Popular sovereignty and the enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act is not all that dissimilar from unrestricted expansion of slavery. So these candidates, while proposing different ideas, ended up basically making it inevitable that the Democrats would not win the election. Abraham Lincoln had a free soil platform. That's the main thing you want to remember, is that he had a free soil platform, which was not an abolitionist platform, but rather the idea that slavery would not extend into the Western territories. He also agreed or supported protective tariffs, free land for homesteaders, and internal improvements such as railroads. And then the Constitutional Union Party, more of a minor party here, was really focused on just preserving the Union, enforcing the current laws and the Constitution. So here's a famous political cartoon about the 1860 election, not only showing Abraham Lincoln leaping forward over the other candidates, but also kind of playing on the idea that he was very tall here. So here is the actual results of the election of 1860. If you were to add up all the total popular votes, you would find that Lincoln only won about 40% of the total popular votes in the country. So a very minor victory here by Abraham Lincoln. So what happens after the election? That's the key point of this lesson, is what are the effects of Lincoln's election? In December of 1860, South Carolina will unanimously vote to secede. And then within 6 weeks, we see 6 additional states voting for secession. And so in February of 1861, we see the creation of the Confederate States of America. And their main 2 platforms or objectives are going to be limiting the imposition of tariffs and also limiting restrictions on slavery. They elect Jefferson Davis as their president. Now, between secession and the actual inauguration of Lincoln was quite a few months. Lincoln is not elected until March 4th of 1861. During that time, President Buchanan is considered a lame duck president when he knows he is no longer going to be in power, but he does not prevent secession. Congress, on the other hand, tries to do things to keep the South from seceding, and they proposed the Crittenden Compromise, which would have been a constitutional amendment which would have guaranteed the right to hold slavery above the Missouri Compromise line. So not only in the Western Territories, but also in the land previously, in the Louisiana Purchase that had previously excluded slavery. Lincoln, however, said that he would not support this amendment if it was voted on in Congress. So here you can see are the states that did and did not secede, ones that had slavery. So the blue states would have seceded before Lincoln's inauguration and also before the first shots are fired at Fort Sumter. After Fort Sumter, those purple states would have been seceding. And then the ones that are in that kind of pinkish coral color, they had slaves, but never seceded. They remained part of the Union. So let's get into our last topic here, the debates over secession. This is one of the most timeless debates. It has continued on and even grown more intense over history. So the debate is whether slavery is the cause of the Southern secession or whether it's states' rights. What's interesting is that there was a poll done in 2011, and I've included some of the main things there on the left. But what you can see is that 48% of people who responded to this poll believed that states' rights were the reason for Southern secession. Now, what is the best way we as historians try to determine causes, effects, all of these things that are happening throughout history? And it's through primary sources. And so what we want to do is we want to look at what are the actual declarations of secession that the states created. So here are 4 of the states that seceded, and it shows how many of the words in their declarations were devoted to these issues. So you can see in 3 of the states, more than 50% of the declaration was devoted to the topic of slavery. And you can see that states' rights is a much more minor aspect of their own declarations. So I included some quotes here from the actual declarations. So Texas, this is what Texas is saying about why they are seceding. In all the non-slaveholding states, in violation of that good faith and committee, which should exist between entirely distinct nations, the people have formed themselves into a great sectional party, now strong enough in numbers to control the affairs of each of those states, based upon an unnatural feeling of hostility to their southern states and these beneficent and patriarchal systems of African slavery, proclaiming the debasing doctrine of equality of all men, irrespective of race or color, a doctrine at war with nature, in opposition to the experience of mankind, and in violation of the plainest revelations of divine law. So what Texas is saying here is that a Republican Party, a sectional party, has grown to control the entire nation, and they believe in the equality of men, which is at war with nature and the experience of mankind. A smaller quotation from Mississippi. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest in the world. And the last one I have here for you is South Carolina. A geographical line has been drawn across the Union, and all the states north of that line have united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States, whose opinions and purposes are hostile to slavery. He is to be entrusted with the administration of the common government because he has declared that government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free, and that the public mind must rest in the belief that slavery is in the course of ultimate extinction. On the 4th of March next, this party will take possession of the government. It has announced that the South shall be excluded from the common territory, and that the judicial tribunals shall be made sectional, and that a war must be waged against slavery until it shall cease throughout the United States. So South Carolina here is referencing Lincoln's House Divided speech, and when he declared that he believed that the country would not be able to continue to exist half slave and half free. And so even though Lincoln had stated he was a free soiler, that he just wanted slavery to not expand, many people took this House Divided speech to infer that he was going to do what he could to end slavery and create an entirely United States without slavery within. So, obviously, these are just portions of these declarations. However, based on the statistics, based on these quotations, you can see that slavery is absolutely a huge reason why many of the Southern states decided to secede. And in fact, you can even connect the idea of states' rights to that many of these states wanted to have they wanted to maintain their state's right to control their economic system or control the system of slavery. So there's your learning objective H, describing the effects of Lincoln's election. I hope this was helpful for you, and if so, please like and subscribe.